Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport of The Pin Down over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel. And to plug a couple things that we do, of course, you should be reading Omari Sankofa over on the Detroit Free Press website. And if you haven't already, subscribed to the Motor City Hoops Substack, as I give notes and analysis after all games, and we'll have some NBA draft whenever the time comes. But Omari, before we get to Pistons talk, I have a little show and tell. Do you have anything to show and tell? I have something I want to show the listeners. So if you have anything, this is the episode.
I don't think I have anything to show and tell. I'm looking at my desk and I don't have anything. I'm just going to leave this one to you.
Okay, so our high school football season ended. I still coach high school football. We had our end of the season banquet on Friday, and the seniors got all of us coaches a gift, and it was probably the coolest gift I've ever gotten, so I wanted to share on the pod. It is a bobblehead of me, and all of us coaches got it. I cannot tell you how good these are. It has the headset. It has a whistle. Obviously bald, all of that stuff.
Put it up to the camera a little bit closer. Like that's like perfect. That is the most that's the most accurate bobblehead I've ever seen.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I still need to find out where they got it from, like who was making these, because they just sent in a close-up picture of all of us coaches, and they were able to, like, with all due respect, I've seen some recent statues of NBA Hall of Famers that didn't look as accurate as that. And so I was just like, my biggest shock too was I don't know how they got a picture of me smiling, because listen, I'm known to smile and be upbeat on the pod, but whenever I'm coaching and stuff like that, kind of the rep is I'm not always happy, not always smiling. So it was very impressive. Whoever's doing it, whatever the company was, knocked it out of the park.
That's better than like the vast majority of NBA bobbleheads I've seen. Like NBA bobbleheads are usually just vaguely resemble the player it's supposed to be. That's top tier. Whoever made that's got some talent. They need to go national.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like if I can do anything to help out this company, it's give the website so that way they can kind of blow up and be even better. Steven Suggs says, how can I get a Bryce Simon bobblehead? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anybody wants one of those, but I may share it from time to time here on the podcast. So I do have a quick rating and review to read. This is from our guy, Matthew Chapman, from Adelaide in Australia. He emailed, he actually had a question we may save for later, but he said he wasn't sure we were seeing this review since he was from Australia. So said, listening from Australia, really enjoy the in-depth Pistons coverage that you obviously don't get from the bigger podcasts. It's nuanced insight that avoids homerism, and the chemistry between Bryce and Omari really adds to the listening experience. Cheers. So wanted to get that one in there, Omari. Always like to shout out our listeners and, anybody that gives us those ratings and reviews.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, continue to send us your ratings and reviews. We always love seeing them. We'll shout you out on the pod. And this is, I don't know if we've ever had better basketball to talk about than we do currently right now on this episode. So by all means, if you enjoy listening, give us a shout and then we'll give you a shout.
Yeah, Mimic 313 says, give the people what they want, Bryce. The people do not want that. They want a bobblehead of, Harry says, Christmas Rip Hamilton bobblehead. Real quick shout out here as well. I went over on Harry's podcast and we put the top 10 players in the Pistons rotation in the different Harry Potter houses, Omari. So I don't know how much of a Harry Potter fan you are, but that was a lot of fun. I mean, for me.
I read all the books when I was younger. I have not seen the 6th or either of the 7th movies because I was not crazy about the movies, but I'm pretty well versed in Harry Potter lore. So
okay, I love it. We put Cade in Gryffindor, of course. So Philip Bender says, finally able to catch the live stream. Scott Thompson, first live stream for me. Appreciate you guys, everybody watching, listening, all of that. Thank you so much for your support and turning in. And Wes says, I've not read any of the books and I only watch movies 1 through 5. Wes will no longer be the producer of the Pistons Pulse podcast. If you want to put it in your resume to replace Wes Davenport, you can DM me on Twitter at Motor City Hoops or Blue Sky at Motor City Hoops. So let's talk about the Pistons here, Omari.
Wes, I can loan you the first book if you ever need it.
Yeah. Okay. I have all 7. He doesn't seem overly interested. Wes has more of a life to deal with. We have a very good Pistons basketball team to talk about. Enough with this nonsense. I want to talk just about the team to start, Omari? We'll get about some individual players, some Ron Holland, some Jalen Duren, I think is one that people want to hear about. I want to talk about Cade because he still is very good at basketball. I just want to talk in general about the team. Let's start here. What are the vibes? 7-9. Can you give the numbers of how many games they've played in how many days and the number of back-to-backs? Do you have that handy right here? Because I find it crazy.
Yeah. So today, actually, we're recording this on Tuesday, the 19th, is the first day of the season that they have not had either practice, travel, or a game. And then their game against the Wizards was their 5th game in 7 nights because they had the back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday. They were off Thursday. They played Toronto Friday, off Saturday, and then Sunday and Monday. And that's just, they've had a really compressed schedule so far. And it doesn't really get better from here. Like today's an off day, but they kind of go through the ringer again next week. So they've played a lot of games. It's definitely been a packed schedule so far.
I think if the one thing with that as well is they haven't had back-to-back off days either. Is that right, Omari?
Yeah, they've had 4 back-to-back sets already. All road home or home road. Yeah, it's been pretty condensed so far.
And this is the first time they've had back-to-back off days, though. Like, right? They've never had 2 days off.
Yeah, no, they haven't had a 2-day gap in between games at all. So they'll practice tomorrow, but yeah, this is the first time all season they've had a 2-day stretch without a game.
Yeah, so that's what is kind of interesting with this. There was some team the other day, I was looking at their total games played, and I was like, they played like 3 less games than the Pistons. Yeah. What is going on here that Detroit has already played 16? We're setting at 7-9. I know there's been some losses. The one on Monday night included, Omari, that people obviously are a little frustrated by. But the 1,000-foot view, I feel like if someone would have told us that this team was going to go 7-9 in their first 16 games, we've had 1 missed game from Ivy. We've had 3 from Tim Hardaway Jr., 2 from Jalen Duren. Fontecchio missed a couple. Injury luck so far has been decent, but 0 games from Asar Thompson. I think I would have taken 7-9 in a heartbeat. Like just the win pace that this team is on right now, 16 games into the season. And then obviously the defensive rating and what they've been able to do defensively has been incredible. So Omari, your thoughts on just like, would you have taken 7-9? Are you surprised with this start?
Yeah, I think you take 7-9. And I mean, really, I really did feel like their last loss against the Bulls was a scheduled loss. Just, 5th game in 7 nights. I just didn't think they had the energy that they usually had. But you look at 7-8, best start in 6 years, like still the 4th, 5th seed, top 10 defensive rating. If you said that this would be the start 2 months ago, I think everybody takes that. And I think if there is any frustration, it would just be from the feeling that they've left some wins on the table, which they've had so many close games that, it's understandable why you would feel that way. But that's kind of how it goes, right? Like you win some close ones, you lose some close ones. If you're losing just off of a big box out or like easily correctable stuff, I think that's very much a step forward compared to where they were previously. So they've just looked competent. I think defensively, they've all been locked in from, almost from top to bottom. Offensively, they've gotten just enough, whether it's, I believe Beasley heating up or THJ missed a few games, but I still think he's like 40-something% from 3. They've gotten just enough on both ends to really compete every night. And there's only been 2 games this season. Really only 1, but I'll throw Tuesday in there too, where it just seemed like they didn't have the same punch that they should have. So 14 out of 16, that's a much better ratio than this time last year, I would say.
And they still had their chance on Monday night against the Bulls. Like I thought they were I'm always a little bit behind in terms of watching the game just because I can't always stay up or I have to take my kids somewhere or something like that. But just kind of watching the score, I was like, oh, this is going to get ugly. And it didn't. And then, here's the problem. What they haven't done in some of these games, Omari, is I think they have to get better at taking control of the game in the middle of the game. They have to take control in the second quarter, in the third quarter, because when you let every single game go to the fourth, you know what happens sometimes? Zach LaVine goes on a heater sometimes, right? Like sometimes there's just a dude on the other team that's really, really good and he takes over the game. So I think that's part of the learning experience for these guys as well. It's not just how do you win close games? It's how do you not be in so many close games, Omari? So that way you can take control of the game. You can be up by 15 with 5 minutes to go instead of a tie game, with 5 minutes to go. We saw them do that against the Wizards. I also want to make mention, I was listening to the Bulls broadcast. I kind of just, whatever one pops up is the one I listened to. They were talking about how abysmal the Bulls were on Sunday. There was no doubt that Chicago team was going to respond on Monday. Even though they were also on the second night of a back-to-back, they were playing for like kind of pride after getting completely blown out by the Houston Rockets on Sunday.
No doubt. They definitely had something to show. And, like people mentioned that they were on the second night of a back-to-back, which is true. But, the Pistons had one more game basically in that past week. And there was just like an energy difference. But you make a good point about putting teams away and not being in a scenario where Zach LaVine or even like Tyler Hero, right? Like he had 3 straight threes. They were up 9 with 2 minutes left.
Yeah. So that's what, as Omari was saying, you had LaVine do it. Tyler Hero did it for Miami. Yeah. And RB Nesbitt says, "What's up, fellas? Shout out to the Best Pistons pod. We appreciate that." David Binkowski mentions if they can go from bottom to middle of the pack in one season, that's huge improvement. Omari, let's stay on the more positive end of the floor so far for the Pistons, which has been the defensive end. They're still 8th in rating as we record this, even after that performance against the Chicago Bulls. Where are you at on that end of the floor? Who are we giving the credit to? Who are we giving the love to for this being a top 10 defense in the National Basketball Association?
Got to give it to JB, right? Like you essentially have the same rotation you had last season, just give and take a few guys who, honestly, like, I don't know if the gap defensively between Burks and Boyan, who they have now, Beasley and THJ is that big. So, I think that's just coaching. I think it's the team maturing from last season, understanding that you really just cannot give teams any let up in this league, right? Like you mentioned Tyler Hero, but you also have Milwaukee where Giannis essentially carried Milwaukee early and the Pistons just couldn't quite put it away, right? And then they end up coming back. But when I look at that, they absolutely have to put teams away. And in that second half, they do have moments in the third quarter where they could just add a little bit more punch and turn a 10-point lead into a 15-point lead, 15-point lead into a 20-point lead. The one win, in the end win we've seen was probably the Wizards. Like, would you agree with that? So there's absolutely some room for growth there. Even with that, I mean, just the amount of games that they've been able to pull off, which was not a trait of the team a year ago or the year before that, where, you may give up a lead, but you can still make enough plays to pull it out. Like that Toronto game was disgusting. And that's like the definition of, a mature win, like just doing just enough to stay in it and pull it out. So yeah, defensively, there's just a maturity for the team all around that, I think has been reflected through the coaching staff and just how motivated they are on that end of the floor. Like Cade has 15 blocks. I think his perimeter defense has been great. Isaiah Stewart's been great. There's been a lot of players who have been great individually, but just as a team, I think they're in sync. I think the communication's better. And it looks like they know what they're doing most of the time, which even just that is a pretty substantial improvement compared to years prior.
Yeah, says Kyle Metz says without Asar as well. Yeah. I know this has been talked about a lot. You bring him back in, and that's going to be a major impact. I don't know what it does offensively. I don't know what it does to rotational minutes. Kyle also brings up, was Burr taking those charges, though, in reference to Tim Hardaway Jr. being at the being at the top of the league. To me, taking charges is a form of rim protection. Obviously, Tim Hardaway Jr. isn't going to go block a shot at the rim. But and Wes brings up really good team defense in spite of a few rotation guys, which aren't very good on the defensive end. I will say I'm going to watch Jaden Ivey very close over the next few games. I thought he was really, really good through the first 12, 13 games. I think the last few, it hasn't been quite as good at the point of attack. I know he's coming back from the ankle and all of that. Maybe he just was worn down a little bit. I want to see, and in general, I want to see this team respond on Thursday, Omari. We're giving them a little bit of a pass for blowing that game on Monday because of the rest and the schedule and all that. So if they get 2 days off now, Tuesday and Wednesday, I would like to see a lot of energy from this team on Thursday. Just a couple stats. They are 30th in the NBA in steals, so they don't really turn teams over and still do this on the defensive end. They are 10th in blocks. You mentioned that from Cade. There's some other guys that obviously get involved there as well. And then their defensive rebound percentage is second in the NBA. So they really clean up the boards. That's where Tobias Harris, Omari, I think really proves his value. It's not necessarily the defense, it's what he does on the boards.
Yeah, they're just doing the fundamental stuff you have to do on defense to field a pretty good defense. Like all those things individually add up to them having a top 10 mark, which to me seems sustainable. Like, I don't think you really get to know where a team is in the season until around the 25 game mark. So, in a couple pods, like, I think we'll have a much better idea of where they truly are defensively, especially if Sasser comes back in that span. But to me, it just shows buy-in. It just shows that they believe that they can be a difference making team on that end. It shows that they learned from last season where, like, whatever was going on last season, like, you just can't do that, right? Like, you have to communicate on defense. You have to be organized. And credit, that credit goes to JB. Everywhere he's gone, I think there's been a corresponding defensive bump. He turned Cleveland into one of the top defenses, and it's just been, to be a very substantial turnaround from last season.
Yeah, and as Harry brings up, Tobias is up there in blocks too.
Yeah.
I think it's the way that NBA stats them. Like, I would call them steals because usually it's raking down at the ball. But I think if the offensive player, I guess it makes sense. If he gets off the floor, then they call it a block. It doesn't matter. Either way, he's been very active with his hands. And to your point, like, they're 23rd in the NBA in opponent 3-point percentage. So it's not like 3-point percentage luck or something like that. Now, maybe, as we'll talk about later, they're giving up too many open ones, specifically to big guys, but it's not like they're first in 3-point percentage against, and teams are just shooting awful from out there. Before we go to break, let's talk a little bit about the offense. The offense, not quite as good as what I expected, Omari. They're 23rd. So, not awful, but not, bottom 10 of the league, still bottom third of the league. I think the two things that would stand out to people is the free throw rate, which is 27th in the NBA, and the turnover percentage, which is getting better, but is still at 25th. I think those are two things you would want to see increase. Continue to turn the ball over less, which we've seen the last two games. They actually, I think it was less than 10 even on Monday.
It was. They had 9, I believe.
And then find a way to get to the free throw line more. There's just an efficiency that goes along with making threes and making free throws. They're kind of middle of the road in threes, Omari, 17th in makes, 19th in percentage, 18th in rate. But that free throw rate is what really stands out to me in terms of where they're towards the bottom of the league.
No doubt. Yeah, they're not getting enough opportunities at the line. And, I'm not, like, people will have issues with the way, like, Cade is reffed. He certainly does not have the star whistle, right? I saw something on Twitter. I forget who tweeted it. It might have been NBA University, but they were just showing the most effective drivers in the league. Cade's like top 4. But the only guy on, like, the top 8 or top 10 list that also is not correspondingly among the top guys in free throws. So there's a disconnect there that is hurting the Pistons as far as those easy opportunities. J.I. gets to the line at a good rate. There's probably room for growth there. I don't know where those free throws are coming from outside of just Cade getting to the line, though. Like, I just don't know if they have a roster that is equipped to do that. But as far as turnovers, if this was a team that was just average at turning the ball over and not among the worst, like, I think they led the league for a minute there, they'd be higher in the 23rd in defensive rating, right? And I think this is an average offense. I don't think it's a bottom 10 offense. Like, I agree. Besides the free throws, it's just turning up or cleaning up the turnovers. You clean up the turnovers, you stop giving away 10 free possessions per game. And, I think we'll see that offensive rating climb a little bit and get, 15, 16, 17 in that range.
Wes brings up a good one. Maybe Ron Holland eventually starts getting some calls or figures out how to get calls when he attacks the basket.
Could be Ron.
And then Sasser as well. Sasser, you look at your best athletes, and usually, not always, but those are guys that can get to the rim, whether it's transition, half court, all of that. Scott Thompson brings up a good point. You got to hit your free throws. Yeah. They are also, I didn't give this number. They're 27th in free throw percentage, Omari. Yeah. So it's not like they're baffling.
But you have guys like Duren and Cade who, are not maintaining the percentages they've had in the past. I think Tobias, like, his free throw percentage might be a bit down. There is, I think they will regress to the mean in some ways, and we'll see it even out. But, at the same time, whenever you see a free throw regression, it does make you wonder what's going on there when it's happening to multiple guys at once.
Yeah, so as Kyle brings up, Duren with a massive free throw percentage regression. We were raving about this. I think Wes had a trivia question about Duren's free throw percentage being better than Luka or there by Luka's or something like that.
He was 79% last year.
He's at 51, and Jalen Duren is the third most attempts on the team in terms of per game. Obviously, J.I. is 1, Cade is 2. JI 74%, so not awful, but for your top guy shooting 74%, that brings the number down. And then your third most attempt guy in Duren, like they're just going to start doing hack-a-Duren on all these offensive boards if he doesn't start converting at a better clip. Everybody else is pretty solid, 80 or better, other than Malik Beasley, who doesn't get there a lot, is at 67, kind of a random one there. But that was kind of the big picture view of this team, where the record stands, the offense, the defense. When we come back from this break, Omari, I want to talk about some individual players, starting with Jalen Duren.
All right, we're back with segment 2, and we're going to get into the individual performances on both ends we've seen from some of these guys. We left off talking about Duren a bit, and we're going to pick right up because I believe you have some thoughts on your mind you'd like to get off, Bryce.
I don't have like any crazy thoughts. I just know this is where the fan base is at right now because of what happened on Monday. So I went back and watched all of those 3-point attempts from both Vooch and from Jalen Smith. I will also say Isaiah Stewart was a little bit slow on some of these closeouts as well. So we love to give Isaiah Stewart credit. But if we're going to talk about him in the company of defenders that he's being talked about right now, we have to hold him accountable for that level as well. But my biggest thing with Duren, it's weird, Omari. His best contest of the night was on the first attempt from Vooch. He actually contested it really well. Vooch just made a ridiculous shot. But after that, there seemed to be a lack of sense of urgency from Duren when recovering in a pick and pop, or there was a couple in transition where he just didn't find him quick enough. There was another one where people that read the Substack know I'm so tired of seeing the Pistons get backdoored, where Tim Hardaway Jr. actually got backdoored and Duren went to help, but then the sense of urgency to recover still wasn't there. So what did you see with the inability to stop Vooch and the floor spacing? We saw it with Brook Lopez as well. What did you hear from the team, from JB? Well, what are your insights into why things went so wrong as Jalen Duren's taking the brunt of a lot of this conversation?
Yeah, I think urgency is the right word. Just looking at the game as a viewer, right? Like a lot of those threes from Vooch, like Duren was not within like 4 feet of contesting. It's like some of the most open threes Vooch will get all season. And after the game, JB did say that, the scheme asks for the bigs to play and drop. And it's just inherently difficult to play and drop. And obviously, recovering in time. I asked Isaiah Stewart about it after the game, and he was just like, yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you're playing and drop and also have to get up to the top of the arc every other possession. But with that said, like, Vooch is going to try to get those trailing threes. He's going to pick and pop. That's his game. And he was like 6 for 8 from 3 or something like that. And I'll say 5 of those were probably wide open. There just wasn't an awareness that was going to happen on some of those plays. And I think it's just the lack of awareness that's glaring. I mean, again, you have to be at least within 2 steps of being able to contest that shot. Vooch got going early, and it's kind of like what happened with Milwaukee too, right? Milwaukee couldn't shoot in the first half. Brook Lopez got going, and once he got going with Giannis, who was already going, he had 30 in the first half. Like, it became too much to stop, right? Like, when you have a big that could shoot and they get into a groove, that makes the rest of the game significantly harder. So, maybe there's a scheme adjustment there. Maybe it's something that they need to coach or practice differently. I'm not sure. But if your bigs are playing and drop and Vooch is getting, 7 wide open threes, then something's got to change.
And here's the thing. The Lopez one, I even understood a little bit to start. And I know we all know Lopez is a floor spacer, right? But he's shooting 33% on threes right now, and it was even worse before his last few games. Like, he had been struggling. Vooch is having a career year from 3. Like, I just did a trivia question over on Game Theory, and Vooch was part of it because of the way he's shooting threes right now. After last night, he's 48% on 4 attempts. He's 59% overall from the field, and he's not a lob threat. Like, a lot of his buckets are skilled shooting buckets. So there was no excuse not to know and not to take that away. I wonder, my theory is here, Omari, I think Duren is afraid to close out too hard because he either doesn't trust himself or maybe what it takes to make the multiple efforts to then guard the big attacking him off the bounce. I think that's what he's worried about. I think there's a lack of awareness, a lack of sense of urgency, and then an unwillingness to close out really hard to these guys because of the worry of them then attacking him off the bounce. That's where I'm at with what he's nervous about.
And I could see that because, like, I don't know if you'll agree, but I feel like Duren is better at contesting threes from like smaller guys. And obviously there's like a size advantage there, but I feel like he closes out harder on like guards than big.
Yeah, it's weird.
Which, it's fine for some matchups, but then there's matchups where like it's not fine. Like he blocked a three last night. I forget who took it, but he absolutely blocked a three last night, and it was one of his better closeouts of the night. So that's just something I've noticed with him. Like, I don't know exactly why that happens. Maybe it's just him having more confidence knowing that he's more likely to reject a three from a guy smaller than him as compared to a Vooch where you're probably not going to block that three regardless. But that's something you have to hammer home, right? I mean, that's just today's league. You're going to be playing 5 out a lot. Teams can stretch you out and get you out of the paint, and then their other shooters heat up. Because there's just been a lot of ridiculous shooting this season. This is probably going to be another record-breaking season as far as I would just assume accuracy, because it seems like there's so many guys who are above, 44, 45% this season. So you just can't do that. Like, whatever your defensive scheme is, once you start giving up those open threes to the big, like, your scheme's going to break down.
And Kyle Met says if he's worried about Vooch and Lopez beating him off the bounce, we have a bigger issue. Like, I agree, but like, explain to me why he won't do it then. Like, because the thing is, if he just wasn't aware, then that's a bigger issue. Like, if he didn't know that Vooch is on a hot streak to start the year and shooting this well from three and that he needed to close out hard, that's even more worrisome to me. So like, I guess I don't understand. I was really expecting Omari to go back and watch the clips today and just go, honestly, maybe JB should have changed the scheme. Like, they were putting him in too tough of a position. I don't think I believe that. I think he should have been able to get better closeouts, even in the drop coverages. And a lot of them weren't out of true pick and pop. It was transition where he either didn't match up, or there was like this random one where a different offensive player just kind of walked in front of him and he just didn't have a sense of urgency to get back. The other thing I want to point out here, we've just talked about 6 minutes of how much a floor spacing big helps your offense. Isaiah Stewart shoot threes. This is why. The Pistons need their version of that. And that's why Isaiah Stewart needs to shoot threes. We've seen it uptick just a little bit. I feel like we've just gone on a rant about Jalen Duren's defense and especially the pick and pop stuff. I will say the one scheme thing you could do is you could switch one and then just hope Vooch doesn't take advantage of that or Duren doesn't get exposed by the guard. You can rotate from the weak side, but Omari, if you rotate from the weak side, then guess what happens? Now Jaylen Duren is the last part of that rotation, rotating to the weak side, usually the corner, closing out to a shooter. So I don't know that that's the answer either. Other thoughts on Jaylen Duren? He did have 20 plus rebounds last night. Maybe we should give him a little bit of credit for that.
Yeah, 20 plus rebounds. The rebounding's still been pretty strong. And, we talk about the free throws, but he's also having his most efficient season, just field goal percentage wise, which I think just so many of his points have just come off of lobs. Like, it seems like he's connected with Cade on a couple lobs a night. And
real chemistry, Omari. Yeah. They have real chemistry.
They have genuine chemistry. And it seems even better this year than like last year where Duren.
It's not Omari and Bryce chemistry, but it's pretty good chemistry.
Pretty good chemistry.
Like, we'd be connected on lobs all day. I don't know which one of us is catching it, but we would figure it out.
You're like you say you're 6'6", but you might be like 6'7", because I've seen 6'6" guys. You might be a little bit taller than that.
I'm also 37 without an ACL, so you may be the better chance here.
Well, we'll see. But they do have a ways to go before they reach us.
But yes, real chemistry between those two.
Yeah, it's just like they just look at each other once, so they know exactly what's going to happen. And I think Duren's offensive fit with the team has been good. Like, you look at his per 100 numbers, he's dishing the ball at a better rate than he has, more assists than turnovers. So there's been some growth there. There has been growth. I think for him, it's just the urgency. Like, Dwayne Casey, when he was a rookie, used to talk about just like running the floor hard, right? Like how guys like Bam run the floor hard and it puts them in position early, and the rebounds you give up when you're not doing that. I think for Duren, it's just making sure you're 100% engaged and you don't have those lows. Because like you said, some of it was just him closing out late, or like he was so far away, he just kind of like halfway gave up on the closeout. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like, no, you still got to close out hard. Like, if nothing else, just to set the example and standard. And that's something else too. It's just from a body language standpoint, you don't want your big having that defeated, half-hearted run out to close out on a three, because it just makes it very apparent that you were in no way or shape performed to contest it, right? So urgency. I think that's the main thing with Duren, is just being more urgent.
Kyle Metz says the Drummond special, referring to the rebound numbers. Wes had to explain that to me in the chat, because that was, Drummond would grab a bunch of rebounds but be frustrating defensively. The one thing I will say is he has had more weak side rotation, rim contests, and blocks in 16 games this year. He hasn't played 16. He's only played 14. In 14 games this year than I can remember the first 2 years of his career. Like straight up. There's just not a whole lot of ones I remember. I do like seeing from that. That is impactful. That's not anchor of your defense impactful like you would like, but it is impactful. And I love him doing that and seeing those. Obviously, the play finishing. I think he stayed within himself offensively outside of the random grab and go that he tries to do every once in a while. But I like what we've seen there. Make free throws. Got to figure out this ball screen stuff, whether it's the pick and pop, even on pick and roll stuff. His hand activity has to get better. I know a lot of people are ready to cut bait. I'm not there. I want to see more of a sample, right? He's had 16 games with JB Omari. 16. That's it. So
and he also just turned 21. Just turned 21. Yesterday was his birthday. So, there are bigs who.
Now I feel awful that yesterday was his birthday. That sucks. I'm sorry, Jalen Duren. That's my bad. Not on your birthday.
I think the bottom line though is he's young. He's just turned 21.
Yes.
I'm younger than you, and my 21st birthday seems like it was forever ago, right? So, there's still a lot of growth ahead for him. And, it may be a thing where, it just takes a minute to click. I could absolutely see him middle of year 3, year 4, beginning to turn things around. We'll see. But 21 is still young. So I try to keep that in mind. I think Asar was almost 20 when the Pistons drafted him, for example. Sasser was 22. So, he's still younger. He's going to be younger than guys in next year's draft, too.
Yeah, so Wes says, oddly enough, the random grab and goes are also an Andre Drummond similarity. Knowing what I know about Andre Drummond, and he said this was also a Drummond, this was not the intent. So hopefully people didn't think we were this was a bit. So you're supposed to have a rough 21st, says Harry. Yeah, maybe that was it. Let's talk about Ron Holland. Just thoughts on Holland. We talked about the game against the Bucks where he missed the free throws, Omari. We've been past that. Where are you at? I think for me, the defense still looks good. The jumper still is obviously a big question. Any thoughts change about Holland over the last week?
No real changes in my thoughts. The 3-point shooting is really the only thing I haven't liked about his season so far. I think has just found ways to be productive. And I think outside of the threes, he's done a great job of playing to his strengths as well. When he decides to drive to the rim, it's quick, 2 steps. Very decisive move. I really like the way he drives. I think he has a pretty solid handle. He's had some Euro step finishes. He's been pretty creative, I think, and how he's been able to get to the rim. And that's just really good to see, because in the G League, you don't always know how that's going to translate. But he did get to the line a lot in the G League, and that was really how he scored most of his points. Defensively, I think he's been really solid. I thought he had a really solid defensive game against Toronto.
Yeah, so Omari was mentioning the Toronto game there. Steven Suggs says Ron Holland does have a knack for an impactful steal leading to a drive to the basket. And Mr. Ray, I know Ron's still quite raw, but he's been more serviceable than I would expect him coming out of the draft. That Raptors game that you referenced, Omari, he had a really awesome first on-ball possession versus RJ Barrett. Forces the turnover, had a block on Barrett. I thought he made 4 hustle plays in the first half alone that led directly to points for the Pistons. So I think he is finding ways to contribute tangibly. You could say this steal leads to points. This offensive rebound leads to points. It's just not always his own points, especially from outside the 3-point line.
Yeah, but it's also just been impressive that he's earned crunch time minutes in several games at this point. And has played pretty well, I believe, in those minutes. He just does small things over and over, whether it's the drives or he's a really solid rebounder, I think, for his size, pushing the ball up court. He stays within himself, but he's always trying to make a positive play. And I think that's just a very, very strong green flag for a guy who's pretty young. I mean, he turned 19 after he was drafted, still very raw, obviously, in a lot of ways. But when you have a guy that young and that raw, when they find ways to be productive, I think that really bodes well for his future.
And people have to remind me, like, he is shooting well from inside the 3-point line. He's at
And at the
61%. Like,
line.
a lot of those, yeah, and at the line. Like, outside of those Bucks free throws, he's been really good. Actually, I think they're 2 of the 3 misses he has on the season. And to your point with the rebounding, if you go per 36, he's 4th on the team in rebounding. Jalen Duren is 1. Would expect that. Isaiah Stewart, we mentioned Tobias Harris. He actually rebounds the ball just a little bit better than Cade Cunningham does when you look at it per 36. So it really is like, if he was shooting even like 30% from 3, I think how we would think about him and feel about him right now. But at the end of the day, he's not. And we've got, how many threes has we've got 35 threes. That's not a great sample size, obviously, but it's not like he's only taken 10. So we've seen the sample. I don't think the jumper looks broke, but eventually he does have to start to make it.
No, I mean, he's 4 of 35 from 3, and like they have not like been skipping him over when he's open in the corner, like as much as you would expect, for a guy who hasn't been hitting them. Like his stroke is not broken. Like genuinely, if he's just hitting like 33 or 34% of his threes, you could probably play him, 25 minutes every single night and feel pretty good about it, just because he just has a knack for making plays while he's out there. Like that's the only aspect of his rookie season I haven't really liked yet. It's just the 3-point shooting. Beyond that, I think he's been more polished in some areas than some, like I probably expected, and some of us might have expected when he first came in.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Marcus Sasser before we go to the final break, because once we get into Cade Cunningham and some questions, who knows where we end up. I don't think he's in an easy role right now, Omari, not always knowing when he's going to play, when he's not. He's played in 8 games this year, but 10.9 minutes. I actually would have liked to see him in the second half of that Bulls game. JB went to a 10-man rotation in the first half. He was picking the ball up full court. I thought this set the tone. He had a catch and shoot 3-point make. He had a floater. I thought he had great minutes, and then he didn't get a rotation in the second half. I just wanted to give Sasser a shout out there, because again, that is not an easy role when you don't know whether or not you're going to get in on a given night, when your minutes are going to come. So to be able to come in and impact the game in a positive way, the way I felt like he did, I wanted to give him some credit for that.
No, Sasser's been great. I think the coaching staff has seen his chemistry with Cade, and there's certainly something there. Which when Sasser got drafted, we talked about his hypothetical good fit with Cade. I feel like just pairing him with a bigger guard, who could take off, who could take the bigger defensive matchup. But Sasser in just more of a 3-and-D role, with some secondary ball handling here and there, like that's perfect for him. And if he gets into more of a groove as a shooter, he absolutely is a guy that can earn some minutes on this team, just because you could always use a guy who's going to come out, hustle, play feisty and can heat up.
Yeah. Steven Suggs says, just a nod to Wendell Moore Jr. as well. Like, again, similar type situation. You don't know when you're going to play. He's only played in 6 games. He's played a little bit more minutes in those games. But again, I just like to give those, we give it, if they were vets, we would be like, oh, it was Rodney Magruder. We'd always give him the love, right? Like he was ready to play, and those guys, younger players, are able to do that. So I wanted to make sure we shouted them out a little bit. We're going to go to a break right here. When we come back, I at least want to talk about Cade Cunningham a little bit, Omari. We can talk about some other guys or get to questions. Thank you for everybody who's watching live right now. Leave a rating, leave a review, like button, subscribe button, wherever you're listening. We're kind of all over the place now, so please make sure you're doing that. We appreciate the support. Get any questions in. We'll get to some of those at the very end of the pod. But otherwise, we're going to go to a break right now. When we come back, Omari, we'll talk a little bit about Cade Cunningham.
All right, we're back, and we're going to discuss Cade Cunningham, who I think has been really, really solid this season on both sides of the floor. Like, we talk about the potential he's had on defense. I think he's been incredibly locked in. And the 15 blocks, again, he had 22 blocks all of last season, and now he has 15 in 16 games. I mean, I can't think of too many times a guard has emerged as a shot blocker year 3 or year 4. I'm curious to hear how you thought of just Cade's recent play. Because he's had a couple triple doubles since we last talked about him. He's had 2 Player of the Week nominations, so he's certainly been getting more notoriety than he's gotten so far.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good, Omari. Cade Cunningham is good at basketball. And he's good at basketball on both ends of the floor. Over on Game Theory, Sam Vecini does these player breakdowns, and he did like a 40-minute breakdown on Cade, and it wasn't just his offense. It was what he did on both ends with his defense. It's solid defense. Like the Wizards game, I know the Wizards aren't great, but he had like impressive on-ball possessions where he just gave his chest and cut guys off. He did that to Koulibaly, but then he rips Kuzma just standing in the corner. Did it another time. You talked about the block. So he's a defensive playmaker along with being solid.
Those chase down blocks are insane. I got to shout that out real quick. He's had like 4 or 5 chase down blocks in crunch time this season. Like, yeah, that's just hustle and effort.
Yeah. So the other thing is, or the one thing is that I think he struggles with, he gets lost off the ball a little bit too often. He'll get away from his man just a little bit too much. And so you can usually count on his man hitting a catch and shoot 3 here and there just because he's helping a little bit too. I think he likes that roamer role, Omari. I think he likes to be able to roam off the ball, jump a passing lane, get those blocks that you talked about, those type of things. But man, he's been really good when you consider the fact he's doing all of that defensively while averaging 23 points and almost 9 assists. The turnovers are slowly ticking down, and it's going to be a slow burn because there was some pretty big numbers. But maybe that number gets below 4. I think we're both comfortable. We're both comfortable once it gets under 4, right? Like that's when we're like, okay, we're no more reason to worry. Wes gives me the thumbs up. Probably depends a little bit when they happen. But yeah, I mean, it's really impressive. 37% from 3, 81% from the line. I did look the other day on NBA.com. When you talk about shots at the rim, I still think he has some room to grow there. Still love like the floater. I think where he's going to really start to hurt, he can take advantage of the missed post isolation anytime he gets the right matchup. He is really good. He can go to the middle. He can go to the baseline. He can spin. He's very, very good with those mid-post isolations, Omari.
Yeah, no, I feel like we've seen his complete offensive game this season. We've talked about, Cade posting up for so long, and it's become like a genuine weapon for him. Like he has so much craft to his game. Like he's got great touch from pretty much everywhere. He's great with both hands. Like he could take you left, he could take you right. Like he's got a bag, he's got a bag, as they say. Looking at his numbers now, 23 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds, and almost 2 combined blocks and steals. Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely been one of the best players in the Eastern Conference when you account for both ends. When you talk about the Pistons being 7th or 6th or 8th, whatever they are in defensive rating now, and you have to talk about Cade. He's absolutely been, JB likes to use the term head of the snake, but he's absolutely been one of their top 2 or 3 defensive guys this season. Leading by example, leading in the locker room. Again, the turnovers have been too high. We've talked about that. He started off with high turnovers last season as well, and then it pretty much got down to a reasonable amount by the time we got to like game 25 or so. So something to monitor. But yeah, beyond that, I think he's done just about everything you could ask for from him so far.
So Pistons Jack is in here with us. Appreciate you. If you're not listening to him and, taking in all of his content, obviously Jack does an amazing job. Cade becoming a defensive playmaker has been huge. They've needed it majorly without a Sar and a true defensive anchor at center. That's exactly right. If you don't have that like guy like a Sar who can do this stuff, and if you don't have a real anchor of the defense at the center position, you need these type of guys that can make plays and take away shot attempts and protect the rim and all of that. Chili Damon says what I think he says, I'm more comfortable when they aren't lazy turnovers. The number isn't my issue. It is the flavor. I like the way you say that. The flavor. Okay. It is the flavor of the turnovers that I think are concerning. Yeah, they taste bad. The nonchalant ones, the ones where he's dribbling at half court to start a quarter or a half, and he just gets ripped. Those are the ones he really needs to eliminate. You can live with a lot of the stuff in the half court where he's trying to be aggressive because the ball is going to be in his hands all the time and he's putting up the production. I will also say when he's defending this way, I have a little bit more palates for some of those turnovers, like just knowing what he's giving on the other end of the floor. He's a true two-way player right now. I've kind of hesitated to say this. I haven't looked at it in depth. If he plays this way till the All-Star break and this team wins these games at this rate till the All-Star break, I think there's a real conversation. Like there has to be a real chance that we see this team get an All-Star in Cade Cunningham.
No, it should be a conversation that starts right now, to be honest. Like you look at the fact that this team needed 50 games to win 7 last year. And, they're just about 516 games into this season. He's the best player on what's probably been the most improved team in the NBA, through the first 5th or 6th of the season or whatever it's been. And, I think if you're a voter, you have to pay attention to that and credit that. You have to consider that he's doing it on both ends of the floor. He's had clutch offensive plays. He's had clutch blocks, clutch steals. He's doing it all. I don't know if you're looking at two-way players in the East, like true two-way guys, right? Like guys who are similar to like Jimmy Butler. He's been one of those top guys, like absolutely, if you're looking at guards and wings. He's absolutely been one of those top guys. And yeah, if the Pistons are hovering around 500 in January, they should probably at least have somebody that's in the conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I looked it up the other day with Steven Suggs. Oh my, OMG, Cade Cunningham, All-Star. It's been a long time coming. I don't know when the last one is. I just know there hasn't been one since December 2020, whenever I started covering the team. And I know that's the year Omari started covering the team as well, a few months before me. I know one of those years when Jeremy Grant's first year, there was like a little bit of conversation, but Cade has a way better argument, at least through this part of the season, than what Jeremy had at that point. Before we get to anything else, I want to look at the schedule. We don't always look ahead, but I do want to look ahead here just a little bit. So I lost it. I think they play the Hornets on Thursday.
Yep, and then the Magic Saturday.
Magic Saturday. So those are going to be some interesting matchups. We've seen them play the Hornets. Can they stop and contain LaMelo Ball? We know the Hornets are going to try to win the math game. They're just going to try to outshoot them from 3. The Magic are without Paolo Banchero, but are like on this sneaky winning streak behind Franz Wagner. Then they get the Raptors again, then the Grizzlies, and then we get another NBA Cup. Like one thing we haven't talked about, Omari, this team is 2-0 in the NBA Cup. You get the Pacers on Friday in 10 days. Then you get the Bucks on the Tuesday after that. We've seen them play both of those teams tight. This is a team that has a real chance to get into the knockout round of this thing. That would be really, really cool to see.
Yeah, no, 2-0 in the in-season tournament. I mean, yeah, that's huge. And if you're talking about teams that could benefit the most from that type of environment, the Pistons have got to be toward the top of the list, right? Like you go from, a season that guys have been pretty transparent about, just being, a painful nightmare of a year, to actually being able to bring some hardware home, right? Like they hang banners for the in-season tournament, right? Like this is supposed to be a pretty big deal, so 2-0 certainly matters. I think it gives the team a goal to work for beyond just improving, right? Like it gives you something you can look at and take home and, show off as proof of how far you've come. And it would mean a lot to them. So, they're 2-0. If they make that trip to Vegas, it would be the most exciting event in, Pistons regular season basketball in quite some time. So that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, Kyle says Pistons are going to win their group. He said he called it in July when the groups were posted. It would be really cool. I think it would be fascinating to see them in that setting. Obviously, it's not the play-in games. It's not true playoff series, but it gives you that flavor. And you get to see, I think it would give Trajan and the coaching staff and the rest of the front office with Trajan, an opportunity to really evaluate. So listen, let's go ahead and, first, Wes tried to make this the ultimate Andre Drummond episode. We were about to change the name. He had that Andre Drummond was the most recent Piston All-Star, but it was actually Blake Griffin. So a lot of Andre Drummond comments tonight for whatever reason. Jeremy Goldberg asks this: are we actually going to transfer our first round pick this year? So I was talking with Sam the other day, Omari, and I was like, I think they should go ahead and kind of tank if they're in that realm. But Sam brought up a good point. Is it time to just go ahead and get rid of it? I think that might actually be pretty beneficial to just say, you know what? Go ahead and win. Go ahead and get into the play-in, get into the playoffs, get that experience, get that evaluation. If you get there, it's because Cade and J.I. specifically are this good all year. And then you no longer have those protections and you have all of your draft equity to your disposal.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that debate potentially playing out over the course of several months next year. But I mean, it's absolutely a conversation to have, right? They've owed this pick for a while because of the Stepien rule. It's really tied them up as far as their flexibility in the trade market. Like, if this is a good team and you're looking at next offseason, maybe this is the time to kind of take a swing and really, put some all-star talent around Cade, you're probably going to need that draft pick, like, so it really will be, this season is a pivotal one as far as what happens with that pick and, to what extent the pick determines the outlook for next offseason, right? If you get a Cooper Flagg or an Ace Bailey or, somewhere like that, then, you probably feel pretty good slow run this thing a little bit longer, right? If you're looking at the pick, like, do we really want like the 13th best odds? Like at that point, maybe you just make the play in. Then at that point, you probably push for the play in and you just convey it, right? Because sometimes you can get a high pick and draft a guy and he turns out to not be the guy you needed anyway, right? I think the like drafts are always theoretically better than they often end up being because you're comparing the best case scenario to, like, you're assuming that things will work out a year in advance, right? Like they get a good player at the top, this player contributes. Doesn't always work out that way. So there's definitely some valid thought to just conveying it this year, getting it done, getting your future flexibility back, and, actually approaching an offseason with all the cards in your hand for the first time in 5 years.
I think it plays it out naturally. I think it plays out organically. If they're really good enough, and as Steven says, I don't think they should change their play for a pick. If they want a winning culture, then if they have a chance to win, they must win. If they're good enough to be in that scenario, then you probably have your guys. Like you have pretty good talented group. That probably means Asar came back and looks really good.
Yeah.
Holland progresses, all of that. And you may not feel like obviously you would take a Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey or, whoever, but you probably feel pretty good about the young talent. And it does make sense to, hey, let's convey this pick. And then if we want to trade picks to go get the necessary second score or third score or defensive anchor or whatever, now you have access to all of that. So they can guarantee that they miss the play-in. There's no guarantee to make the play-in if they don't sit guys and they are good enough to be in the conversation. That's from Wes. So yeah, and then the other thing from Aruna is at the trade deadline, what do you do with Beasley? What do you do with THJ? Do you get future assets for those guys? How does that work out? So future problems, but it's kind of cool that we're discussing them.
Yeah.
Because you know what we could be doing? We could be talking about Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey and what they would mean for this team if this team was 2-14. And they're not. They're 7-9, which gets us to some questions. We'll try to roll through these, but Piston Jack says, sorry if you've already discussed, but we haven't. After watching the Pistons struggle since beginning the podcast, how does it feel to be watching a 7-9 Pistons team? He asked this directly to me, but Omari, I know you're not a fan. You still cover this team, though. I know it makes it more enjoyable for me night in and night out. I cannot tell you how stressed I was when this team was going through the 28-game losing streak because I was just so annoyed of all of the conversations and everything I had to have. Now it's so much more calm and relaxing to watch. It's much more enjoyable. The other thing is I feel like I can watch the other team and get a quality evaluation of them as I watch them play the Pistons, where that wasn't the case last year. So yes, to answer your question, Jack, it's a huge difference for me. How is it for you, Omari, just covering the team?
Yeah, I think it'll just, going back to that word flavor we used earlier, it just gives the season a different flavor, right? You're not like last season, like you're essentially, through the first 30 games, like, I'm like reporting on what is essentially this massive house fire, right? Like it's just, it's not a good situation at all. It's a situation that's causing panic, concern, like what the heck is going on? When you're 7-9 after 16 games and you're looking at February and March, which typically have been the worst months of Pistons basketball, late February, March, April, the past few seasons, you're looking at that as a reporter as they could be playing consequential basketball, and that completely changes up how you normally cover the second half of the season. And, like there's something to that, right? I think to cover a team that's winning, 14, 21, 22 games every single year, that could become monotonous. Like there's only so many ways you could write. They committed 20 turnovers, they lost a 10-point lead. There's only so many ways you can do that. And this season, so far it's just had a completely different tune. I'm writing stories that I hadn't previously written because they're in a new scenario. So, it just adds, it's made this job probably more interesting than it's been this early in the season, with the exception of last season, because even though they were losing from a reporting standpoint, there was a lot of content. So Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know how much better the engagement is. I don't know that our podcast numbers are better. I don't know like the Substack and all of that because the losing was just so bad. People still tune, and the fan base is just incredible anyway. Like that's part of it. The Detroit fan base is incredible. I assume we'll see the numbers spike once the Lions season is over. Hopefully for Lions fans with the Super Bowl win, probably the best team in the NFL right now as Kansas City took its first loss. Let's get to these a little quicker. Derek Brown, do you guys think we should have drafted Donovan Clingan instead? Listen, I think Clingan was really good. I had him higher on my personal board. I think if you draft Clingan, that definitely means you move on from Jalen Duren. I'm not upset that Trajan wasn't ready to make that decision. I'm still cool seeing this season play out and see what they have from Jalen Duren. I think Donovan Clingan would have been an interesting addition, though. I think he's going to be a really, really good player, but wings are hard to come by. We've seen a lot from Ron Holland defensively. We've seen some of the finishing. I don't think we'll be worried about this if he figures out how to shoot. If he starts making shots, I think we're going to be plenty happy with this pick. That's a lot of ifs that we don't have answers to right now.
Yeah, I like Donovan Clingan. I think we were pretty open on the pod during draft season that, like, I would have taken him number one personally. I think he was probably the most sure thing in this draft as far as just being an impactful player. And for me, it's like, I feel pretty good about this guy being my rim protector for the next however long. And we're already seeing that beginning to translate. So I'm a big Donovan Clingan fan. Well, with that said, I'm not there yet. I think it's way too early. Like, again, I really like what I've seen from Ron Holland. I think there's been far more positives and green flags than negatives and red flags. And if he figures the shot out, like he's already a rotation wing now, and he's 4 of 35 from 3 or whatever it is. But that's because he's done everything else so well. And that's just defending, rebounding, and, just finding ways to make the right play. That's going to earn you minutes. And I'm still high on this potential. I think if he figures that shot out, that's just going to open his driving up even more. And then you start to talk about him in a different light as far as his offense. And you can always use a wing that can, play, make, and defend. Like, it doesn't matter what stage of whatever build you're in. Like, that's always going to be something that you need. So, yeah, I'm not there yet. Like, I think Ron's been good, and his upside certainly is higher than most of the guys in this draft.
And I think some of his depends on Asar as well. Like, is Asar's jumper better? What type of player does he turn into offensively? We've seen J.I.'s catch and shoot really improve, and that allows you to put other guys on the floor because if he's a real floor spacer, you can have room for somebody else on the team not to. So all of those things, we could be looking back, right? And just say, hey, Ron Holland and Asar are, overlapping here. Neither can shoot, even though they're good defensively. We have a non-floor spacing center, which Clingan is a non-floor spacing center as well, but would be better defensively. I understand the question. I just don't think we have enough data yet to properly answer it. I want to get to 2 more real quick. Derek says also, do you think Ivy could be a trade piece for the future? Hard to believe Trajan will keep all of Troy's picks. He wants his own team. And then Philip Bender says, is Ivy ceiling Zach LaVine? I will say, I don't think Ivy ends up being a trade piece. I think he's shown his ability to play with Cade Cunningham and then play in staggered minutes away from Cade Cunningham. Zach LaVine would be awesome for J.I. I don't think that they're nearly the same type of players. I don't think J.I. will ever be the floor spacer and shooter that LaVine is. LaVine's also a little bit different of an athlete, but I do think that the ceiling for J.I. is the leading scorer on the Pistons. Not the best player. I want to be clear. Not the best player. Cade Cunningham will be the best player, but I think there is a ceiling for J.I. to be the leading scorer, the best bucket getter. I don't know if he hits it or not, but if that's what you're talking about ceiling in terms of a Zach LaVine, then I suppose that is the ceiling. I'm not sure he gets there or not.
Yeah, I don't really have a good player comparison for Jaden Ivey. I think when you talk about guys who are like that quick with the ball in their hands, like that's a very unique trait that a lot of players don't have. If you're talking about just sheer impact, as far as like Bryce said, being like a top scorer, highlight producer, then yeah, I absolutely think J.I. could be that. Out of everybody on this team, he's absolutely got the best chance of being a guy who's getting you like 7, 8 free throw attempts a game, which of course would take his scoring to the next level. And yeah, I mean, like he shot the ball really well this season. Like all the signs are that he can be some type of go-to scorer for you. Yeah, when you get to ceiling and Zach LaVine, like I don't really have a good player comparison for RV in my head. So there's not a ceiling I would compare his potential ceiling to.
So last one here, Jeremy Goldberg. How much does this team's offense change when Cade, I think he said he starts getting that star player whistle? Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. This team right now, a little bit of the efficiency stuff is they're middle of the road towards the bottom third in all of the 3-point metrics. And then they're in the bottom 5 in all the free throw metrics. So you start upticking those free throws, especially from your best player and the player that has the ball in his hands the most, and Cade starts getting 2-3 more free throw attempts a game, that changes your offense drastically, Omari.
No, it absolutely does. Like the free throw debates, seeing them play out on the timeline is always really interesting because like he doesn't get that whistle. And it's not necessarily that they are not always not calling obvious fouls, even though I know some people see that, but it's just that other NBA stars get a clear benefit of the doubt that Cade does not get. So, perhaps when they start winning more games, he'll get more respect from the refs. But yeah, I mean, if he's doubling his free throw rate, like he's already averaged at 23, not getting to the line that often. So, if he starts getting to the line, now you're talking about a perennial 25, 26 points per game score. That's also giving you 8, 9 assists a night. I mean, yeah, the difference for a lot of superstar scorers is just how often they get to the line, right? Like if you can crack into the top percentiles of that, like, yeah, you start to see your points per game shoot way up. So we'll see if he eventually gets that whistle and gets the benefit of the doubt.
And Jeremy said it also changes how defenders guard him. That's right. They can't be as aggressive. They can't be as physical. They can't be as handsy. And then all of a sudden those attempts become a little bit easier because of that. We're going to cut it off there. Thank you for everybody for the engagement, for tuning in. We always appreciate the kind words and the comments. And I always appreciate the chat. It's very casual, but engaged, and people are giving their thoughts, but everybody gets along. We appreciate all of you guys and girls so much. I assume we will be back Sunday based on the Pistons schedule where they play Saturday, Monday, could be Tuesday, depending on how things play out. So look for us either Sunday sometime or Tuesday, hopefully with a couple more Detroit Pistons wins. Again, rate, review, subscribe, like, share, all of that stuff. Follow over on Blue Sky. Omari and I have made the move over there. So if you've made that move, make sure you follow us over there. Read Omari on the Detroit Free Press. Read my Substack on the Motor City Hoops Substack. And then make sure you listen to Wes and Blake Silverman on the Pin Down over at Detroit Bad Boys. And make sure you're taking in all of Pistons Jack content as well. He does a great job with all of his Piston stuff. Otherwise, Omari, take it away, my guy.
Yeah, again, I'm going to shout out Bryce's Substack. Like he's literally sending his game notes like within 15 to 20 minutes of the final buzzer, and it's always really insightful stuff. So if you're not subscribed to that, go ahead and do that right now. And with that, I'll close this out. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big thanks to Wes Davenport, as always, and we'll talk to you all next week.